Welcome to Dragon Talk, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with an amazing person who it is always a delight to have.
Tito is an amazing
Thank
person.
you.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Jim Zub. How are you?
Hello.
I'm here
good.
too.
You make everything
Why
happy.
don't you get
It's
an
okay.
introduction?
No, I don't know. I didn't get one today because you're an amazing person.
That does not matter.
Shelley is also an amazing
Yeah,
person, but that's
geez.
known. Everyone knows that.
Shelley.
Old news.
It's all right.
Tell us the
For
glory
old
of you.
people, it's old news.
Oh,
That's my new podcast.
oh my God.
Old news for old people. Like,
Well, as the Canadian here, I will politely ask you to introduce yourself.
my name is Shelly Mazzanoble,
Welcome.
the
You're the
other
best.
person who's here. The other host of this fine podcast.
I'm going to leave. You guys can talk.
Yeah.
You guys do the interview. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Do you like
so
comic books?
I love comic books. I love
Yeah.
one in particular.
What's that?
It's based on this Cartoon Network show called Rick and Morty.
Oh my
It is
God.
like the funniest thing I've ever read.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
I
did
had
you
a
write
tiny sliver of a part in that. It was a joy.
that? That is so funny.
Yeah, we did it's so surreal saying this out loud. We made a Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons story, and it's real, and you can get it now, and that does not seem possible to me.
Not just in comic book form, but it's in actual paperback
Yeah.
and or
It's amazing.
hardcover. It's a hardcover.
People can purchase and enjoy. It freaks me out.
Yeah.
2 years ago, so I'm here in town in Seattle for Emerald City Comic Con.
Which some people say ECCCCCCC.
Exactly that. You said that so eloquently.
There's too many C's, and it never stops. It's an
It's weird
infinite
that-
C's.
Like I don't know why
ECCCC.
why they would say that.
ECC. I'm here for ECC. And this show is so special because it's sort of this show,
This show,
but
Dragon
also
Talk.
Emerald City Comic
Oh,
Con.
that show
also
too.
special.
Right.
Every year, it just feels like something very special happens or amazing. Or in the last 2 years, 2 years ago, someone first brought the idea. Sarah Gatos, who at the time was at IDW Publishing and hilariously now works at Oni Press, the co-publisher of the Rick and Morty D&D comic. She came to me and said, we have a crazy idea. We went out with the Oni Press people for dinner and everyone was brainstorming weird stuff. And someone said we should do crossovers. And the idea of Rick and Morty, Dungeons and Dragons came up. And I laughed. What a bizarro concept. And she said, would you be interested in being a part of that? And I said, sure, but it'll never happen. But yeah, throw my name into the proposal. That would be great. I love writing the Dungeons and Dragons comics. Near and dear to me, this would be a hoot. Like 8 or 9 months later, she says, we're making headway on it. I'm like, sure you are. There's no way. Hasbro and
Well,
Adult Swim are
8
gonna,
or 9 months later.
yeah, 8 or 9 months later. This is just not happening. That's like your classic, oh sure, the wheels of spinning endlessly. And then last year at this show, we were committed to doing it, and I met Pat Rothfuss for the first time in person, and we'd already been
Here in
emailing.
Seattle. For,
Yeah,
for
and we had
Emerald City.
dinner during Emerald City, and we talked about the project and how it was all going to work and what we both wanted to bring to the table. And here we are a year later. That book is in stores. I went into Barnes & Noble yesterday, and they have an exclusive version, and it's like front-facing feature book, and we made this thing, and we somehow got this through the filters, and no one's figured out that we should never have done that, because how the hell could you take these two chocolate and peanut butter and do all the thing?
And yet they go together.
do.
So
They do.
perfectly.
Well.
That was what surprised me. At first it just sounds like kooky crashing toys into each other.
Yeah.
And then I think how I knew it was going to work was Pat is insane, but also Pat, he wrote this sort of overview document, like here's how we can make this work. And the two things he wrote in there, that was like the first stuff I had received from him after the initial hello emails, were so intrinsically on point. They were so smart about and thoughtful about these two bizarre properties. And they echoed a lot of my own thoughts on them, but just right on the nose, poignant and understanding. And what he said was, and this is me paraphrasing, but it's very close to how it was written. It basically said, people think that Dungeons and Dragons is a bunch of idiots, rolling dice and killing monsters. And it is, but it's also, an empowering way to tell stories and a way for you to envision yourself and reinvent yourself and understand things about yourself at the gaming table.
Mm.
People think that Rick and Morty is nihilistic violence and anarchistic kind of, jerks and edgelord kind of humor and all these sorts of things. And it is that. but it's also about broken emotional people trying to figure out how to be a family and some of these deeper, darker, qualities. If we can bring both of those elements into play, that there's two levels that the story works on, that we're saying things about D&D and we're saying things about the Rick and Morty cast through D&D, through the power of D&D, then it will work. And if we don't, then we're just going to hit the basic high notes everyone expects, do a bunch of callback humor, and it will be okay, but not good. But if we can go deeper and we can make it work on both levels, if we can teach you why D&D is great, even while we're giving it a vicious jab in the stomach, if we can tell you why the cast of Rick and Morty is so special while also being nihilistic and violent and awful, but see that emotional quality beneath the surface, then we've got something. And the fact that we had such a phenomenal artist in Troy Little that could play both those elements. He could play the big, broad, slapstick, violent humor, but he could also do surprisingly, shockingly beautiful and nuanced character expressions and pay off some of the emotional content that we were trying to deliver. I'm amazed at how well some of it, came through on the page. Stuff that I had hoped would come through in the text and the subtext,
And I'm excited to now, I'm not a comics reader, I don't get the first issue.
Bye.
No, I mean what I mean by that is I never bought into going to the comic book and getting an issue, right? But I've read tons of trade paperbacks, and that's just almost like in a graphic novel or that type of way of consuming the stuff.
Right.
I think it opens it up to a whole different audience.
Absolutely.
And right now is that moment where people who may have been fans of both these properties, but they just didn't have,
or just one or the other.
Right.
That's what's cool to me, is hearing from people who are Rick and Morty fans who have never played D&D and they finish reading that book and they said, I want to now. I'm engaged and intrigued about the game. And everyone knows the brand, or everyone knows,
what
the ampersand, or D&D is that thing where you sit around a table and roll dice. But now they actually understand something intrinsic about the game, or vice versa. A D&D fan who's like,
I
know Rick and Morty's a
Rick
thing,
and Morty, but yeah.
And this surprising love letter to the hobby and game that we all love has truisms about D&D, both the earlier editions of D&D and the current edition of D&D, some of the good and bad things that people can bring into a game, and the empowering qualities that it can bring to you in the escapism and entertainment, that you have a direct engagement with instead of just passively, being a part of.
And I like that people can have that whole chapter. Now. They can just it's not piecemeal. I mean, obviously there's wonderfulness in watching episode by episode, even with so TV or things like that and comic books. But it's great to be able to sit down and spend an hour or two and read this entire thing and be like, oh gosh, that's so I got it now. I feel like I consumed it all.
And because Morty doesn't know how D&D works and he has to learn in the story, you learn alongside him. And if you know D&D, you recognize what Rick is mucking up or what Rick is putting through the Rick filter and making it very playing to his strengths and weaknesses. But you also get a sense of this is how D&D functions, and this is the way what people bring into their own game, when they play. And that was really important to us. And it's an unexpected gift to be able to do a parody that uses the proper source material, where we didn't have to file the serial numbers off and call it like Mansions and Manticores or something. Like I don't have to make it a D&D analog. Like it was the real stuff, and we use the real terminology, and all the mechanics actually work. And while we're making fun of it, while we're being joyous with it, while we're elbowing it in the teeth, we're also using the real stuff. That's to me, that feels really special.
That's like having a parody band or a cover band that deeply loves their subject material, and they can riff off of it only because they love those specific licks and that style.
I think that's why it works. And I have no proof of this, since I have not asked Hillary this. But when I go back to my desk, I'm going to ask her, because you mentioned, that'll never get done.
Right.
So thinking about because there was no proof of concept that these two brands would go together.
That anyone would. I mean, like Dan Harmon is a role-playing game fan.
Yes.
But he's not the only decision maker at Adult Swim.
No.
And it's Rick and Morty is a gigantic brand at this point, and there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
I know people don't always want to talk about the corporate side of this stuff. But my job is to navigate a bunch of that while I'm trying to bring entertainment and something that I feel that I'm bringing myself into a project, right? Yeah. And so I have to navigate whether or not I want to care about brands and corporate. Those are going to affect my ability to do my job. And so
we're particular about our brand
sure.
too. But so I have a feeling, this is what I don't have the proof of.
Right.
But I have a feeling that it did probably get made because of you and Pat, and knowing that the jabs that you take, they're all done in love.
I think that's probably true, right? Because if it was someone who was that we didn't know ahead of time, I think there would have been a lot more trepidation.
I feel very strange, like hearing that. It's wonderful. I'm super, like, I'm gonna roll into a ball and just sort of roll back and forth. Go, oh, geez, God. Like D&D is has been so important to me. I would not be a writer now without Dungeons and Dragons. It changed me for the better, and it ignited a creative spark of storytelling in me that has never died. And being able to do anything associated with D&D has always been special. And then this just felt so bizarre because you're heaping so many other elements onto it, and we're still able to kind of cut to the core of what makes D&D wonderful.
Yeah.
And somehow, channel the insanity of me and Pat and Troy and making it all happen. The amount of reference material that we sent over to Troy, because we were calling out specific editions. So we would say, this is not just a kobold, this is a second edition kobold. So use the Dieter Lisi artwork or use the, whatever.
Did he have a D&D background?
So Troy played D&D like first edition when he was younger,
right.
But that was the last time he played D&D. He's playing 5th edition now with his kids because of Rick and Morty D&D.
Yeah,
right?
what?
And that's the thing, right? It does. It's like, it's generational now. So we were pulling all this insane reference material, and I'm just like sending him all these scans of very particular crazy things. And every so often Pat would get hung up on a weird little visual hook of some old module or portrait from the Monster Manual. Can we use this angle? Can we use this thing? Just for our own entertainment. And then when the fans would recognize it instantly, and we were like,
like making an homage. And people
all those little bits, someone told me that the week after issue 1 came out, that the copies of Secret of Bone Hill on eBay shot up because we reference it directly in the first issue. And I'm like, that's a great old module. And I was like, we just threw Bone Hill in there because I went through old D&D module titles, and I said, what sounds vaguely wrong? Bone Hill sounds like a sexual connotation. That we can,
what happened on Bone Hill? No one knows.
Morty, you going to Bone Hill? So it's like that was the kind of stupidity that we were then able to use the real material and just all this stuff we were pulling on all these threads.
I dig it.
And it worked.
I loved by the time we got to issue 4, you were giving all kinds of props to the community. Now there's that page with all the dungeon masters on it. I know folks like Maz were super excited to be
and we
represented.
Want to surprise people with some of that stuff. The idea that the dungeon spoilers, there's a dungeon master. We riff on the classic dungeon master from the old D&D Saturday morning cartoon, and that was our natural choice. As soon as we decided we're going to have the DM be a urged deity kind of figure, we were like, okay, well, it's got to be the little shrimp with the balding and the but what else can we do? And so you're like, okay, Gygax, and how can we make this work? And then we said, no, we want to bring it all together. Like, so let's have some of these really potent modern DMs that have been formative and powerful in the current generation of D&D. And that is really part of the bigger love letter, the reason why we trip through all the editions, the reason why we poke at all the different little corners and holes in the fandom and the streamers and the all that stuff is because it's all part of it now. It's all part of the broader Dungeons and Dragons thing.
You had that great tweet storm from about a week ago.
Oh, I went a little nuts.
Yeah, but I loved it. I loved it. I retweeted the crap out of it because I was like, there's something really heartfelt about what you were saying.
Yeah, we were the gist of it is we were talking about why now. Well, why is D&D hitting? I wouldn't say a peak, but it's definitely hit a visibility that it has not had maybe ever. And why is it grabbing so many people on such an intrinsic level? And so this is a conversation that I've had with so many different people. I had it here when I was in the office back in late 2017. I was doing a story push on a project that hasn't been announced yet.
A very cool project.
What, I'm doing more D&D stuff.
So many. We haven't even gotten to the B portion of this interview.
And we talked about why now, why this edition, why this moment, why this community, and people just literally, someone on Twitter just asked me. They said, "Well, why do you think D&D is popular right now?" And it like uncorked this bottle, and
genie came out.
I've been waiting for someone to ask.
I've been waiting for someone to ask that, and I go, I've been talking about this nigh constantly for the last few years since 5th edition launched. These are the broadest of. There are many reasons, but these are the broadest elements. And we were talking all about visibility, and we were talking about the way that we engage entertainment and the way that a new generation is engaging entertainment. A generation of people that watches Netflix and binge watches stuff and wants customizable entertainment when they want, where they want, in the format they want. What is D&D but the ultimate sort of toolkit for creativity and storytelling?
Right.
What you want, when you want, to the amount you want. You want to binge play for 8 hours with your friends? Great. You have a good budget? You want to spend a bunch of money on high-end, ludicrous collectibles? Sure. You want to just have pencil, paper, and borrow someone's dice? You could be a student on a budget eating ramen, and you can go to other worlds. You can engage your entertainment in a way that you passively don't watch. You know, you watch TV or you watch streaming or whatever, and that's passive, but I can make stories. I can engage stories that we can tell a story together, and all of us have input into it. And even if I'm the dungeon master and I'm quote-unquote in charge, I don't know where it's going to go, and you don't know where it's going to go. But at the end of this thing, we're all going to find it. That's a potent thing that people don't get in their day-to-day lives. That's a thing that you get a voice, you get an engagement, and you get to be empowered. How many times do you get to have a clear goal, be heroic, or be evil, be sexy, be cool in your day-to-day life in a fun way?
Always.
Always.
All of those.
All the time.
No.
Mostly the evil one.
Definitely. There was a great article in one of Seattle's weekly newspapers today, The Stranger, about Ethan's girl.
Schoonover?
Yep. His the
middle school for girls.
where the girls are all playing D&D.
Yeah.
And it was, I started reading it, and it actually almost got me misty-eyed because there was this girl that they interviewed, and her parents were like, we've always described her as very quiet. And she was talking about D&D in this amazing way, and about how she feels confident, and her character makes all these awesome choices,
empowering.
and about she's a pirate when she plays. And the author said that while she was talking, her mother texted him, and she's like, my daughter just totally blew me away right now. I don't know the side of my child. And it's just bringing it out. And this isn't the first time that we've heard that. But people,
so when I was I played D&D and stuff like that. When my brother went off to university, I got really quiet at school. I was terrified. You're getting older, you're a teenager, and you don't want to ever embarrass yourself, and you don't ever want to embarrass yourself in front of a peer group or that classic kind of thing. Role-playing games gave me the confidence to be better at public speaking. They gave me the confidence to have a funny thought and then realize I could say that thing out loud and it wouldn't be the end of the world. Even if I got embarrassed,
blame your character.
Life could go on. You would be bigger than that moment.
Isn't that weird though? When
it's
you
amazing.
Think about a game can make you
but sports bring camaraderie to people, right?
And
sports build confidence. You take karate and you know how your body moves and you understand, or you exercise and you feel better, or you hang out with a peer group and you build confidence. There's no difference there.
No, there
isn't. The
isn't.
difference, I feel like, is that it's so much more accessible to more people because you're not even limited by a lot of those physical limitations, and you're also not. You can come from such diverse backgrounds and bring those experiences to the table so much easier.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, there's this safety filter of it's not even really you, it's an empowered character of you. So you can even experiment and try and be more, be different, be weirder, and not be afraid that someone's gonna slap a label on you because of it.
I know. I guess. I know the benefits, and I know that it's true.
It's not like I have to tell you guys this.
But I love talking about it.
But you're telling our listeners.
Yeah.
I love talking about it because sometimes I will sit and think how the heck does this, why are people playing D&D and then like actually like literally becoming better people
Yes.
Yeah.
because of this game, whereas you're talking about sports, and I like that analogy, but it still feels different. Like it still feels like you're an athlete and it's more of a tangible thing.
Sure, but I think it
But I think
brings the
that's
best
culture, too.
it brings the best qualities of
yeah.
sports, because there's a winning and losing-ish aspect. We're rolling dice. There's this, we as a team are going to do something. We're going to defeat villains. We're going to slay dragons. We're going to do stuff, right?
We're going to do it together.
We're going to do it together. We're going to grow. We're going to change. We're going to build something. But the coolest part is it's not even like a sports game where you go, we need to score this many points. I don't even know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I don't even know what hole we're going to fall down and what cool dramatic potential we're going to pay off. These people, their characters are going to fall in love, and this person's going to discover that they're really, that they have an inner power in themselves, or this other person's an explorer and a tinkerer. And we're all bringing together all these qualities to discover things about ourselves and each other. While we're being kooky, while we're kicking butt and having fun in a framework that's so flexible that one group wants to be, I jokingly call it the theater majors who are going to, nail their wrist to their forehead and they're going to cry and they're going to whatever. And I love that stuff. I love it. Along with the hardcore strategists that are like, all right, how can I squeeze the maximum potential out of these rules?
Yeah.
And we actually have a common ground somewhere between that where we can all do stuff and be engaged.
And that's a spectrum. I always think like people think like, oh, it's one way or the other.
No.
But like, no, there's people and there's games
and there's
even
situations
people
where I'll flip. In this particular combat, I'm going to get weirdly specifically strategic because I can see the interplay of these spells and this tactic. But then other games, I'm like, theater of the mind, screw it. Let's just...
Yeah, and you're more about your character.
Yeah, let's have fun with it.
Yeah.
You can have days where you drift along that mode. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And the game allows for it.
Yeah.
I love that. Or a different dungeon master, their enjoyment of that process will change your enjoyment of that process. If someone is a hardcore narrative DM, I will lean into it. And if they're a hardcore strategic DM, I'm like, oh, okay,
I can do this too.
I can do some of that.
Yeah.
Did you see who the byline was for that Stranger
I
article?
did.
By
I was
the way,
going to ask you. I'm like, I think that's his name. That's our
Matt Baum, who was the dungeon master for Queens of Adventure.
Queens of Adventure.
Awesome.
Yeah, and he had never played D&D until he did it on a live stream for the first time.
Dungeons and Drag Queens.
With Dungeons and Drag Queens here in Seattle, which is fantastic.
An amazing group.
But I love hearing about young people getting into Dungeons and Dragons for all of these reasons.
I see what you're doing here.
You see it? You see the segue?
Just hung a lamp around.
Yeah, there you are. So yes, you got this amazing project with 10-Speed Press, the same folks who published the Art and Arcana Visual History book.
That book is stunning.
So stunning. I can't
believe that book.
I handed it to people. I handed it to Gail Simone just a few minutes ago as she was here in the office. And you could see her eyes light up just wanting to get into all of that. So amazing publisher, really focused on what makes Dungeons and Dragons awesome. And tell us about this project. How did this come about?
I got to tell you this sort of backstory because it's crazy. So when I was in the office late 2017 doing this story push that I mentioned earlier, one of the things we talk about D&D, of course, 3 days of just hardcore conversation. And one of those things was telling the story about I'm 8 years old. I'm playing D&D for the first time with my older brother and cousins, and how it empowered me and how it ignited that creativity and how special it was, and the specific elements of art and lore that tapped into something within me. And my eyes just glitter just thinking about it, and Adam Lee was there, and that guy and I, we are in sync. Like, he had very similar formative experiences. And I just think we're having a good conversation over a pint after a day here at the office. Months later, they're talking to 10-Speed and this idea of a bridging product for, say, 8-year-olds to discover and understand the core concepts of D&D. And I'm not talking about rolling dice. I'm talking about storytelling, character, where to go, what to do. He says, who really gets this is Jim Zub. Let's ask him what he thinks of this kind of broad product that we're talking about. And so we start brainstorming over emails, and then we get on some conference calls with the 10-Speed people, and it all just starts pouring out of me. Like, I'm 8 years old. What is going to grab my attention and make a real impression on a young me, or someone in that right on the cusp of discovering this cool stuff? Well, how can we unlock this in other people? And so at first it was literally like one book. We were like, okay, it's going to be this broad overview of like character classes and some monsters, probably more monsters because the monster book always grabs everyone, and look at all that cool art and funky creatures.
Yeah.
And then we start talking about, well, heroes versus monsters and how this stuff all fits together. And then everyone is so passionate about it. The editors at 10 Speed and the Wizards of the Coast crew and Adam and I and everyone, we're bringing so much joy into it. And everyone's like, this is bigger than we thought. This is cooler and we can do more with this. So it's now a series of books called the Young Adventurer's Guides. The Dungeons & Dragons Young Adventurer's Guides are essentially a rules-free, like a toolkit for storytelling. So it's, here are creatures in the D&D universe. Here's a bunch of beautiful new lush artwork. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. And here's a bunch of information. This is where this creature comes from, and this is what they feed on, and this is where their lair is. And if you had to think of them and imagine them, this is what you would compare them to size-wise. And this is their qualities. And we didn't organize it alphabetically. We organized it thematically. So the Monsters book starts underground. So we have all these cool underground creatures. So you can imagine these creatures interacting with each other and where they dig through tunnels or they, lurk about. And then we move to the surface, and then we've got forests and mountains and oceans and all this stuff. And then the book ends triumphantly up in the air. So we've got flying creatures and dragons, of course, right? And so it's this big soaring spectacle of cool artwork and ideas and telling kids, look, you're going to go on adventures and you're going to find these things. And some of these things you're going to make friends with, and some of them you're going to fight against because they're bad or they're evil or they want things that you don't want, or all sorts of stuff like that. And just getting them thinking about their own storytelling qualities, giving them cool little factoids about what these creatures do and what they feed on and what their defenses are or what their weaknesses are.
Yeah.
If if you're in a tunnel and you hear these kinds of sounds, look out for these kinds of creatures, or this is what undead are afraid of, or this is what, a master vampire can do. And so they're tailored for like an 8-year-old reading level, but with this exciting, engaging language. And then in between some of the major sections, there's these things called encounters. They're a short piece of fiction setting up a scene with a character, and then there's a series of questions at the end. It's like, what would you do? Like, what decision would you make? Where would you go?
I love this.
And so you're prepping them for role playing. You're giving them the tools to make decisions, very free form. We're not trying to tell them to roll dice. We're not trying to tell them write down a bunch of stats. What we're saying is answer these questions and think about yourself engaging this material. Then Warriors and Weapons is basically all the martial classes, beautifully illustrated races and the character classes, the non-magic classes essentially. So along with equipment, tons of illustrations of equipment. So what armor are you wearing? What weapons are you wielding? What kind of stuff do you need to assemble to go on an adventure? Do you need to have rations? And where do you store all this stuff?
10-foot poles and coils of rope and
I know that sounds really
potions.
dorky, but when I was a kid, man, I would imagine the kit. I would imagine the stuff. It's like you're getting ready to go on a trip.
Yep.
What do you want to take? Don't forget all the things.
Well, and that's a very kid-like thing. My 5-year-old, she gets such a kick out of having a purse and putting meaningless stuff in the purse. Like she literally has like here's this trinket and this toy and this thing. And
Quinn likes to fill up his backpack.
Right, and it's a very idea that makes you feel adult, even though it's got nothing to do with adults.
And so you're saying, what does this stuff look like? What does it feel like? Is this heavy? Is this light? What would you take? And who are you? And so you're creating a heroic persona. You're imagining yourself on adventures. Here's the bad guys. Here's the good guys. Or here's who the range of possibilities. And then what we're saying is bring that to the table. Bring that to Adventurers League or go to your local gaming store, or your parents are now going to sit you at a table and say, that thing that you do, this is what you roll. Or that race that you are, these are the statistics that go with that. But we're not going to overwhelm you with rules. We're not going to overwhelm you with the statistical qualities of it. We're just going to give you a visual toolkit to build your own things and get excited about the possibilities. And you can open it up at any spot. You can read it from cover to cover if you want, or you can just get absorbed on what are the biggest creatures and the smallest creatures, or which creatures are underground and which creatures are in the oceans. Or you can get absorbed on, the different races and class combinations that you could provide for them. And that is an imagination toolkit, and that is a storytelling toolkit. We want libraries to carry this, not because they're game books, but because they're like creative writing,
Yes.
kind of prompts.
Yes, I was going to say that there are prompts.
Yeah,
for all
and giving you a very simple framework to understand the same kinds of qualities that you will take to the table.
Yes.
And so that was really important to us is this engaging to a young reader? Is it exciting for them? Does it give them new information that they don't know about this world and these options, and then leaves them free to explore in whatever kind of way they choose, with the natural understanding that, did you know this is a game? You can play this. And so if they want to follow up, whether it's with their peer group or with adults or with a game demo, it's really easy for them to imagine themselves now moving to that next step. And that's what's really cool for us is when we were planning these things out, I said, look, I know naturally the easiest answer would be strip all the artwork out of the monster manual, throw it in this book, we'll throw some new text on top of it. I said, but honestly, if you really want to engage people, you should make art specifically for this book. Not to kidify it, because that's not what we're trying to do,
Right.
but just so that not only an existing D&D reader could get something out of it, we can show more detail of things. We can show every piece of equipment visually. We can really dig into the lush visual quality that a kid's going to get.
The writing's not informed by the art you have available. It's the other way around.
And 10-speed, to my astonishment, was like, well, what if it was all new? And so there were a handful of pieces that we realized were so iconically good from the 5th edition books that we would reuse, but at 95% of it's new artwork.
That's great.
And so these books, I now feel like not only are they great for 8 to 10 to 12-year-olds, maybe even a little bit older, you could just give it to a new player.
I'm not going to lie. When you were talking about all the monsters,
Yeah.
I'm like, I got to read this
No,
book. Because I find myself all the time, like, we'll be playing D&D and the party encounters some kind of monster, and everyone goes, oh, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this type of monster. Like, I don't.
You could just flip open the book and hand that to players.
Like that.
And because there's no stats on it, the DM doesn't have to worry about wrecking the power level.
Yeah.
If I could just flip a book open and say, look at that, and you realize, oh, did you know that a beholder can be from this size to this size?
Right.
They could be the size of one of those giant beach balls.
But
Right.
Well, now you can visualize it so much easier. That's how big a beholder
Especially
is.
like if a wizard or a character rolls Arcana and oh, you got really high. Here, you know all of
Here's
this
some
on this page.
Yeah.
But I could hand that to an adult, and I could say, I know you're intimidated. You want to try D&D, but you're intimidated by charts and you're intimidated by stats and dice. Look at this.
Mm-hmm.
You can read this in an hour or two, like nothing, and just write down some things that catch your eye, and then I'll show you how the game works.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the granular stuff. Tell me what kind of hero you want to be, and then we'll make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that to me feels like that's more valuable than
I think so.
overwhelming someone with here's the 10 by 10 grid. And although it's funny because when I was a kid, one of the things I loved making were dungeon maps. So in the Dungeons and Tombs book, I'm getting ahead of myself because it doesn't come out until October, there's a map making section, which is literally here's graph paper and here's all the
here's how you
that's
make it.
awesome.
secret doors look like this and traps look like this.
I dig
That's
that.
one of the things also that's so great about D&D when we were talking about that earlier is that there's so many different facets for someone to discover and fall in love with that you will get those kids that are like, I could just make dungeons all day, every day. And
characters.
someone
That's all I
else is
wanna
like,
do.
I just want to make characters. And someone
have
else is
a
like, I just
binder,
want to draw owl bears.
Or I just love wizards and spells.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or the miniatures or any of the different
Or
elements.
now, like, I want to read more about dragons.
Yeah.
You know, like, it just inspires so many different loves.
Absolutely.
And you know what these books remind me of? It's the Practical Guys.
Practical Guys,
Were you
yeah.
here when they were?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course
Yep.
you were.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've been here since the Stone Age.
But there was the Practical Guide to Fairies, the Practical
Yeah.
Guide to Dragons.
Wizards,
Yeah.
Was it-
monsters.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and
We
my
had wizardry.
my
and
girls every once in a while will
dragons.
say like, "Hey, can we read the fairy
Dragon
book?"
riding.
And we'll pull out that Practical Guide to Fairies and read, and it's less broad
Right.
than what you're talking about
Sure.
because it was about a specific kind of
There's also
Feywild and group. But
one of the things that was cool to us was the ability to do storytelling through lines that are obvious when you're going to see all 4 books, but that they still stand on their own. So, for example, in the Monsters book, there is a section on vampires, and then there's master vampires, and then there's a legendary vampire, which is Strahd. And so you're like, oh, this power level increase. And then in the Warriors book, you've got one of the things as we're going through is we have adventurers kits and we have a vampire hunter's kit in there. Well, what would you need to carry if you were going to be a vampire hunter? So you're like, oh, vampire, kill vampires. That's how that all fits together.
Yeah.
In the magic book, one of the major magic items is the sun sword. So you're like, oh, it's a vampire killing sword. I get it. And then in the dungeons book, one of our many dungeons that we tour through is Castle Ravenloft. So
you use the isometric.
You got a little chunk of that map in there. So you're basically like, here's a story ready to go, but we're not telling you have to do it all. But it's clear, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can take all these pieces and you can use them in your own storytelling if you want, or none of it.
And that's that, by having that clue essentially in all 4 of those things, it also teaches the thing that Dungeons & Dragons is all about, which is taking stuff from different source books and then playing them in your head, and then all of a sudden you've got an original story. But you were inspired by all these practical items that you saw in different areas.
And the kind of decision making. So some of the decisions in the books, these encounters that we put together, are very, combat, run in, run out, save your friend, save yourself kind of stuff. But then there's some that are real soft skill kind of negotiations, or there's one that I'm really proud of. That's you've made a mistake and you're trying to convince someone else not to get into combat. Like, how do we make it clear to them we never meant to be in this situation? Right. You know what I mean? Like, a little more complex sort of thought processes like that. That kind of stuff was important to me, that we were showing all kinds of different decision-making elements within the scope of the rules, right? Yep. But not even rules, of the fiction, of the toolkit. And just trying to push and pull those different qualities that will find their way into a game in unexpected fashion, and I've got an amazing crew that I'm working with. Based on the schedule, when we put this thing together, it would have been great. I would love to have written the whole thing, but my comic writing schedule is absolutely bug nuts. And so I said, look, can I architect out the structure for these books? And then I'm going to bring writers that I trust into the mix. So I've got Stacey King and Andrew Wheeler, who are 2 great D&D players, good friends of mine, near and dear to my heart, who know this stuff, and they know that they're into it the way I'm into it. And so I templated, this is how I would do a creature, this is how this stuff makes sense, and then we parsed out different parts of the book, and they were writing elements of it, and then I would do editorial, and then we do approvals, and back and forth. The 10-speed people were amazing. Andrew and Stacey were amazing. All of us trying to bring knowledge and research, but also passion into it. And what I loved was that Stacey and Andrew didn't just follow a template like a cold, hard photocopy, but they would bring their own ideas into the mix. Hey, what if we had these other things to it? Or what I was thinking? I literally woke up last night and I wrote down some notes about wouldn't it be cool if we added these, when we're doing the size references, how we can bring it to. I thought about this kind of encounter, and it's like all of us are passionate about it. It's not just, I'm not just on high pointing note, hey, you do this and you do that. We're all trying to make it better. We're all trying to make it special.
D&D party.
Right.
Like bringing all your different skills to bear, all the art that was put into this. I love that. And the patron of 10-speed having the wherewithal to kind of be like, oh, this is something that we should bring to bear.
One of the editors at 10-speed is an old D&D player.
Yeah.
And every so often he would throw these amazing little things into the mix. I was like, where'd that come from? And he goes, oh, man. He's bringing it all back for me too,
He's going to start playing too now.
He's like, I'm a young adventurer. I need this guide.
So that I feel that kind of passion is going to make this stuff extra special. That it's not just, like here's a cold data that we're vomiting out on the page. This is like every little profile is fun. Yes, it does all hook up with D&D 5th edition canon, but I'm not taking the text block of the Beholder, cutting out a bunch of bigger words and making it for kids. What I'm saying is, what aspects of this creature are going to viscerally, can I get your imagination firing with? Yeah. Whether it's the way it looks or the way it feels or the way it smells or the way it moves. What can I tell you about this creature that you can imagine it in your mind and be excited about taking it on, that it wasn't about data, it was about storytelling.
And I love that also you're creating, this like chain of events, right? Yeah. So like, we have these ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of D&D books that Ivan and Kayla put together. And then I feel like these books are kind of a next step of or then the Endless Quest books that Matt Forbeck is writing, like as, kind of a young adult reader on his own type thing. And then, you get the starter set and you start playing, and then you get, we get all the 3 core rule books, and then you're killing Strahd, and then you're writing your own stuff and dividing your own things. Like
and then you're Jim Zub.
Then all of a sudden you're Jim Zub.
No, impossible. I don't even know how I got here.
You're creating Jim Zub clones all over the place.
I hope
Good.
so.
'Cause
Mind
we have a lot of
clones.
work we want you to do.
Story
I know.
clones.
Do you know
Yeah,
what-
right, exactly.
Yeah,
You're
right.
working on
I'm
so much
really
stuff.
busy, guys. I could use some friggin' clones. Here's the other thing too, though. Like honestly, someone on Twitter when these books got announced, and they didn't mean it in a negative way, but they were sort of like, "Are these basic? Is this to replace the starter set?" I said, "No," and they were, "I don't get it." And
It's
I
not a
said,
game.
"Well, first of all, it's not for you. Second of all, and that's not a bad thing, but different products for different people, right?
Yeah.
Different way." And they go, "Well, we already have the starter set. That's very easy to understand." And I said, "I know it seems that way for you as a gamer who's played this stuff for decades. You feel like you could give that to your mom and they would get it, but unless your mom's a gamer, which is entirely possible nowadays, that's not true. Like people are intimidated by comics. I can hand them a comic, I don't know how to read those. And you laugh, but it's like, it's really true. Some people just don't know what they don't know, and they don't want to go outside of a very safe zone of information.
I only read romance novels. That's
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's his jam.
But the point is, like, sure, maybe this product doesn't have the exact ingredients that would have brought you into the hobby, and maybe that's what the starter set is, and it exists. Maybe, ABC and 1, 2, 3 is another thing that grabs at a certain age, right? Maybe the Endless Quest books are all that it takes. You know what's great? Having all those options.
Yes.
Right.
Maybe the comic book brings people in the door.
Yeah.
Maybe a video game brings people in the door. Maybe a cartoon or a movie or a regular fantasy novel that's not D&D specific, or Critical Role in the Adventure Zone. It doesn't matter. What matters is it's all available, and it's all intrinsically working broader and saying you can be a part of this. You should be a part of this. This is for you. It's for him, her, they, everybody.
I love it. I love it.
I love it so much.
So
Next time it's my turn to read to my. When do these come out? When's the
So that's a good question. So the first 2 books come out July 16th. So that's Monsters and Creatures
Okay.
and Warriors and Weapons.
Okay.
And the second 2 come out, I want to say mid-October, but I don't have the exact date wedged into my brain yet.
I'm bringing these to my son's summer camp,
Yeah.
and I think I'm gonna do a little
Storytelling?
thing because one of the things that I keep saying I want to do, but I'm intimidated, is DM for kids.
Well, it's the best.
So-
I love DMing brand new players.
I feel like this is my on-ramp.
Yeah.
That I can just ask those questions in the book, and we can just riff off of
Also,
that.
then
Story
it starts.
time.
I mean, in some ways,
So-
that's how I when I was dungeon mastering for my kids, it was very open ended.
feel like
It felt
that's
a little
what
bit like
they
the
need.
questions that you
Yeah.
were talking about.
Yeah, because you want to empower them. What you don't want to do is intimidate them with,
No.
you have to do it this
Here's your
way. You
character
have to
sheet.
roll this,
Add your dex mod.
and this will
Come on, kid.
Wrong number.
do it right or else. Yeah. It's real broad, real, storytelling centric.
Yeah.
I love DMing. I love bringing new people in the hobby just in general because it's really exciting to me. The purity of the responses that people give mean a lot because when you've been playing for decades, you can't help but gamify it. You look and you're seeing it through a filter of a mechanical filter. And so when I play a game, when I'm the player, it's really hard for me to be a player now because I've been the Dungeon Master for so many years.
Yep.
But I'm a player, and what I'm trying to do is I'm simultaneously trying to make the DM's job easier. So I'm trying to preempt, and so I'm trying to bring the group together almost overly too much.
Yeah.
It's like, could you be more of a troublemaker? Because
We need
I'm
some
just
drama.
I'm
We
like,
need drama.
But what I want to say is like, I know how hard your job is. I'm trying to help you.
Yep.
But the other
You're a
thing,
good player.
That's a good partner in general.
right?
Yeah.
But the other thing too, though, is I'm looking at it and I go, well, it's first level adventure. They would never kill us. So it's just a pit. And it's like 1d4. Like I'm like, the gears are just going the whole time. And what I love about a brand new player, they don't have any of that build up
Presupposition.
of garbage in their brain. So you put a threat up against them and they go, oh, I could die. Every time.
Yep.
It's a rat with a knife and they're like, oh, we got to run.
He's gonna shank me.
You're
I'm gonna
sh-
lose a kidney.
That
in this
giant
fight.
rat could gnaw my leg off. You're like, statistically, it's almost impossible. But they don't know that. I had a group I ran in college on a basic adventure, and they went down a cave option down one of the tunnels, and there's a huge pool of green slime. And they're like, here's this murky, I'm describing it, all viscous and all this stuff. And someone takes a stick and they stick it in the pond, and it melts it. And they go, if we fall in there, we'll die. And they just backed off and they never went down that tunnel. I'm like, that's like half the adventure down that tunnel.
You're like, you
They're
guys.
like, what if we fall and I'm going to melt?
Yeah.
I'm not going down there.
I'm not taking damage for nobody.
That'd be stupid. And you're just like, that would be stupid. But an adventurer,
Right.
when you know the stats, you're like, nah, I can't do that much damage. They'll just try. Well, I'll stick my face in it. Who cares? And but a brand new adventurer, man, they don't know, and that's what's amazing about it. They will parlay with anything because they will. They don't assume they have to fight. That is the craziest thing.
And
they get
come
into
up
their
with
very first
very
encounter,
interesting
and I'm
solutions.
telling them, okay, roll initiative, do this, and they're all like, hold on. What if
We don't want to fight. We want to love.
Yeah. What if we laid out our weapons? I'm like, what are you, nuts? You know.
We embrace the slime. We want the slime to be one of us.
But you're amazed sometimes at the really natural storytelling that comes out of those choices.
Yeah.
Where someone is suddenly realizing, hey, we could bribe these guys. Hey, we could sneak past them. It doesn't have to be kill them, get their treasure.
And I like there's so many new players who are coming in who are also showing that newness and that freshness to old grognards who've been playing for years. And they're like, oh, I can adjust how I've been playing for 30, for 2 decades. And then, and then it's all of a sudden becoming this huge breath of life into the hobby in general.
And I love the fact that no one is, man, you run your game how you want to run it. You do the you emphasize the things you want to emphasize. You change the world. We've always done it. We've always made our own campaigns. We've always made our own classes and spells and magic items. But now you can perfectly tailor it to your group, your priorities, the emotional content that you want to have.
Yeah.
Man, there was I forget the hashtag. Oh, it was basically people doing fan art of their characters.
Okay.
Do you remember?
I don't remember the hashtag, but I do remember what you're talking about.
Holy crap.
Well, the artwork.
I started following the hashtag, and I'm getting verklempt like I'm thousands of people posting these characters and telling you in 2 or 3 tweets why they're special.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is nuts. Like, this is the way it should always have been. And I'm so proud to be even the tiniest part of this
You're
current
bigger
thing.
than that.
No, but
Bigger
like,
than tiny.
at least 4
Smaller than a bread
grains
box.
on this 4 grains on the beach of this amazing thing that's been happening.
Not at all.
in
You
this
sent a
hobby.
list over email of
Yeah.
like the 95 different things that you're working on.
I know.
Just related to Dungeons and Dragons, not even your comic book stuff
Yeah.
that you're doing. So
People like superheroes.
You've got at
That's
least 6
weird.
grains.
Not
not
6
just
grains on the beach, man.
Do you feel like there's more of an emphasis on story now than there ever was?
I don't know that it's ever. Okay, I'm sure you're talking the chainmail era is built off of wargaming, right? So in that era, story was a really low priority, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong either. The game can be strategic in its countenance, right? I think that there's definitely that has come to the forefront, maybe in more. It's being emphasized in a very strong way.
Yeah.
I was reading a really interesting article about the transformative aspect of Tracy Hickman coming on board. TSR
and how
back in the
Ravenloft
days.
changed everything.
Not just
Lauren.
Ravenloft, even the Desert of Desolation series. That there's a narrative hook in there that's a much more big picture story. The oldest D&D dungeons tend to be here's an environment, provide your own context, and there's something cool about that because if there's no context, you can provide all of it or none of it. And Tracy's very much like here's a aspirational story that you can bring into the fore. And that is cool too. But I like that it all works.
Right.
It's just
And what we
whatever
found
you
out, which
want
was
it to
really
be.
fascinating when we were at GaryCon and speaking to Margaret Weiss, was that Tracy was instrumental in that, but it was Laura Hickman who brought that storytelling to the modules and really emphasized that fact that it's not just enter room, kill monsters.
Yeah, there was a
so much
connective
more
tissue.
Absolutely.
to do, and so it was really fascinating to see that through line.
One of the weirdest and most wonderful things. So I've been doing Gen Con. When I was a kid, I would look at the oldest modules and I'd flip it out and I would say, this was a tournament adventure at Gen Con 81. And I would go, Gen Con. Like to be at Gen Con.
We just saw the place where the very first Gen Con
right?
took place.
It's so mind blowing. But to go to that, it seemed like that would be the greatest experience. And the first time I went, blew my mind in the whole 10 yards. Now I go every year. I have a booth there, and I share a booth with Howard Taylor, who's this award-winning cartoonist and author, dear friend of mine. And through him, we share a booth with Tracy and Laura. And it's like Tracy Hickman is my friend. And I say that I wish you could see the expression on my face if you're not watching the video.
It is crazy.
It's nuts. Like it's his work, their work, the work did so much for me, you know, with his Dragonlance and Ravenloft and everything in between. And now we hang out, you know, and he calls me Zub. And how did this ever happen? You know, where did this all come about? That I see them at another convention and we, you know, wave and hug each other and how's your kids and all that kind of stuff. Like, this doesn't seem humanly possible. But the whole community's been that way.
Yeah.
You know, the people that when I started doing the D&D comic that were just people on an email chain, I came in the office this morning and we hugged and high-fived and how have you been and what's new? Like I haven't been here in the office in 2 years and it just feels like really familiar. And
coming home.
Everything's awesome. There's such warmth and there's such care for games, for players, for people here in the office. That's why it's doing so well. We talked about the passion that you're bringing in. Like, we're not just putting out a cold product, whether that's Rick and Morty D&D or the Young Adventurers Guides or any of this stuff. It's like, I believe in this and I want to show you why it's special. And let's try and make something really cool, you know?
That's awesome, man. Well, we're very excited. I didn't realize it was 2 years. It feels like it was just like, you know, a snap of fingers and even gone.
I guess that's about a year and a half.
Yeah, but it's great to have you back. It feels,
awesome.
you know, like you're just, you know, I don't know, you're just one of the crew that just comes in and does amazing work and gets, you know, inspired by what's happening here and vice versa. Everyone loves, phenomenal. You know, taking a cue off of what you're doing, and we're just really excited about what 2019 and beyond has got going on.
It's insane.
Where can people? So obviously you're going to be at Emerald City Comic Con.
I'm in Artist Alley, set up at table Y14.
Y14. So if you're in the Seattle area, come and see Zub and all of his amazing stuff that's happening.
Big time.
Where can people follow you if they are just finding out, which is bizarre, but where if they're finding out from you for the first time?
So the easiest way, the hub for everything is just my website. It's really easy, jimzub.com. So JIMZUB.com. And on there is obviously your typical, you know, there's like ordering information on my books, there's interviews, there's reviews. There's also tutorials. On the right-hand side, there's a little menu you can click on, and it's like how to pitch your own comic stories, how scripts are written for comics specifically, some of the economics of working in the comic book industry, and things people may not realize about working on brands and editorial and all that sort of stuff, and trying to make that as interesting and entertaining as possible, but also here's the real stuff. Stuff that I wish I'd known.
You were burping before we were on mic as Rick, but now you're doing
now just burping for the sake of burping. but about how to get, you know, things I wish I had known about comics before I got my foot in the door.
Right. Those are things you could have called these young adventurer guys.
Yeah,
things I wish I knew about Dungeons and Dragons before I started playing.
And then I'm on Twitter a lot. Comics is really heavily Twitter focused. So at Jim Zub, real easy, and I answer questions and you know, love engaging with people. Show me the books. Show me, you know, what you're doing. D&D in particular, I love seeing what's going on there. And there's so many of us that are bopping back and forth and joking with each other, and the in-jokes that build up over weeks, and it's a wonderful time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you are an inspiring and creative force, and I'm hoping for more to come.
Thank you. Well, I have good news. There's more to come.
Nice.
It's so funny because literally before we did this interview, we had to do a checklist of what are we allowed to talk about? And that's all I can say. But this year is absolutely bonkers.
It is bonkers.
It is.
It is. It's going to be exciting.
And the 8-year-old Jim Zub is blowing his mind right now.
Nothing.
There's shrapnel of blood and bone and brain everywhere in his
doesn't
room.
make any
It's
sense.
exploding.
Would have thought.
Yeah. I teach at an art college in Toronto. And
on top of everything else you teach
I'm
too.
an idiot. So what happens though is I'm co-writing the Avengers for Marvel Comics right now, and there's a handful of students that think that's cool. When they found out I was doing D&D stuff, there was way more of them that thought that was cool. Way more.
D&D is cooler than the Avengers.
Way
You
cooler.
heard it here
first.
Way cooler.
You owe me a Coke.
Fine.
It's
Awesome.
crazy.
Well, you are an amazing person.
Time.
High fives all around.
Bring your class back some students.
We're going to swag.
Stickers.
Yeah,
Swag it up.
Swag it up.
Awesome. Thanks,
Love it.
Jim. And
Thank you.
We'll have you back on soon.
Yay.
Yay!